All right. Hey everybody. Man, this is a different kind of video to make. So this is going to be some loose thoughts on how the LCS is right now in terms of its experience to watch, where the teams are at right now, and just how I feel about North American League of Legends right now. Not only from a competitive aspect, but from a viewing aspect as well. There's not really going to be any structure to this. It's just going to be me kind of ramming a little bit. So there won't necessarily be timestamps for this. So I guess just do your best to follow along. Um, I guess the thing that I want to start with is that the LCS, for the most part, is not super interesting to watch right now. And I think there's a couple reasons for this. So for starters, as usual, the talent is pretty front loaded into, two, maybe three really good teams right now. Obviously, Team Liquid and Cloud9 are on tiers of their own right now. And they have quite a bit of talent, both North American talent and international talent, stacked into those rosters. So, obviously they're going to be doing pretty well, and it's going to be difficult to, discount what they're doing. But in some instances, it also makes it very disinteresting to watch because then you look at a lot of the other teams that are in the LCS, and there's a healthy mix of rookies and exciting newer players to watch. If you're looking at the FlyQuest roster, maybe if you're looking at the Immortals roster, maybe the Dignitas or Evil Geniuses roster, depending on how you feel about those. But I think for the most part, like the majority of the competition really is within the first couple of teams, and I think as a result of that, I think it's made the rest of the league kind of uninteresting to watch, with the exception of when you're seeing some of the newer teams kind of go against each other. I think part of this is because TSM isn't necessarily super exciting to watch right now because, they're at the bottom. And while I don't know that they're mathematically eliminated from playoffs, obviously a comeback is probably just not going to happen right now if they aren't already mathematically eliminated from playoffs. And I think that there's a healthy schwack of viewership that likes to watch TSM, and when they're not doing well, I think those people just don't watch. Which that may not necessarily be the case, but I think there is a large number of those people. I think the other kind of thing that's difficult right now too is that the spring split, once again, does not matter. There were a number of changes that were made last year that I wasn't super happy with, but the one thing that they did do that I liked was that they made spring split matter because they made the record carry over from spring to summer. If you weren't aware, that is no longer the case. Spring is now individual and independent from summer, and summer is really the only thing that matters. Which is disappointing because that means that basically the first half of this year for North America just isn't important in any way, shape, or form. Lock-ins didn't matter. It's a cash tournament. And now spring doesn't matter either because the record doesn't carry over, which means the teams are pretty much free to do whatever they want. Which means this whole TSM situation honestly doesn't matter. Because if they clean up their act in summer and have a really good record then they're going to go to Worlds. If they put together, maybe they scrap the whole team, maybe they just get a couple new players and they have a really good standing record at the end of summer and they go to Worlds, completely invalidates the fact that they just completely dropped the first part of their year in spring and in the lock-in tournament, and now they're going to Worlds off of a team that was probably going to be pretty hastily assembled and probably not ready to compete at Worlds. And that's not something anybody wants to see. I think we would rather see a team that put in quite a bit of effort, maybe like an Immortals or a FlyQuest, go to Worlds off of deserving it from their total effort from the spring and the summer, even if maybe summer isn't quite as good as spring. Just because I think that represents a holistically better picture of a team rather than just, them sort of figuring it out at the last second in summer. So I think that's another concern right now that I have, and I think it's something that's hurting just the way that the LCS feels to watch. The other thing is, too, is it's not as fun to watch LCS right now, right? Because the league is in a weird state where it takes itself seriously enough to the point where it's not like the LEC, but it's not competitive enough to warrant the seriousness that it's taking itself for. It's not as competitive as the LCK or the LPL. And so because of that, it's in a difficult state to watch where you're watching some decently high-level drafts and some decent high-level gameplay, but it's not quite there yet. And there isn't like one team that's quite on this like T1 level which is also another problem because it's hard to be excited about the LCS when everyone's excited about T1. Which, don't get me wrong, that's completely valid to be excited about T1, but also it's just like, we don't have anything like that in the LCS right now, and I think it's just like, why? Um, but of course, that's due largely in part to the fact that there's no longevity in rosters here in the LCS, and because of that, a lot of veteran players that were playing aren't anymore, and what remains has been scattered out, and they're not on the same teams that they were even last year, which I think has been a long ongoing complaint with the LCS, to be honest with you, where it just feels like teams trade players so quickly. There's no loyalty to players or to teams. There's a lot of last second deals that get made, and there's no consistent rosters from year to years, right? It's like almost every roster that we saw last year in the LCS is a completely different roster this year, especially for the high end teams right now, right? So it's like Team Liquid, not even remotely the same team they had last year, with the exception of their mid laner and their jungler. I mean, a lot of other stuff has changed. I mean, TSM, nobody can recognize that team. I mean, 100 Thieves are probably the only. 100 Thieves, credit where credit is due, as an organization, has been really good about holding on to players, and I think that they're there to be congratulated and rewarded for that, if at all possible, which I don't know what that would even be. But I mean, obviously, right now they're sort of middling in the pack in terms of standings, but I'm glad that they've kept on their roster, and I think they'll be better off for it in terms of just longevity and synergy between players. But every other team in the LCS right now, there's just no consistency whatsoever. And I think that's difficult to. I think it makes it difficult to get attached to teams, and be excited about rosters and be excited about what these team plans are when in the back of your head it's like, okay, you're saying all this stuff on your YouTube and your Twitter and all your other social media platforms where you have all these great designs and where you want your organization to be in a couple of years, and all these hopes for these players and stuff like that, and then year after year your rosters aren't the same. So it becomes very difficult to buy into anything in terms of narrative wise in the LCS when you know that nothing's going to be the same from year to year and probably from split to split, which again, another thing, it's like in summer, there's going to be wild changes in the downtime during MSI, during the split between summer and spring. Like, it's going to be all hands on deck for those teams that are, just outside of or barely in contention for a world spot, right? And if it's TL and Cloud9 in the finals, here in April, which that would be a cool finals and whatnot. Then you really realistically, you're only looking at one spot, because it's not likely those two rosters are going to just drop off the face of the planet in summer. So, which I think is another problem too, because you're encouraging these massive, drastic changes that organizations are going to have to make in summer. Whereas, if they were able to keep their record from spring, they would have a little bit of leeway to work with, even if they were towards the bottom of the standings, with the exception of TSM. They would have a little bit to work with. They would have a base from which they could do stuff. And they wouldn't necessarily need to make these super drastic roster changes or dump a lot of money into a couple of free agent players that they're just hoping is going to get them into a world's spot contention. I think it encourages way too many drastic changes in the summer, and I think it ultimately puts way too much pressure on teams. It's not to say that there shouldn't be stakes for summer as well, right? There should be an urgency to compete and to expand upon the record you already have. But if you're just coming in with a clean slate, it's like nothing we do in spring is going to matter. So we'll just experiment. We'll do all this, that, and the other. And if we don't like it, we'll just start from scratch again in summer, because it's a coin flip 50-50 that we have something better than what we had in spring. So, and I don't like what that encourages in the LCS, and it also is fuels the fire with increased problems with players contracts ultimately being worth too much money, and then a lot of players can't find contracts because they're too expensive, and then teams end up getting inferior players, and the competitive aspect of the league suffers as a whole, because you have worse players playing than the ones that are available, but the ones that are available are way too expensive because there's no salary cap, there's no there's no spending caps here for teams in LCS, and there really should be. It's not to say that we should limit how much players can make, right? Like, the players should be paid what their value is, but I'm saying the organizations should have a spending cap, right? In order not only to keep the league around for a longer time so that we orgs aren't wasting millions of dollars every year, but also to encourage holding on to these players as well, because now that you've made an investment in them and you have a salary cap, you're not going to go try and respend that salary cap in the middle of the year. You don't have anything to work with. So I think that that would also increase just the idea of holding on to players. So, but I think all that combined makes the league very difficult to watch because there are a lot of players that I think many of us are attached to that aren't playing anymore. Either they've retired or they've been forced to retire because teams wouldn't pick them up, or a million and one other reasons why players might not be playing. Um, and I think that the LCS just feels a bit empty right now. And part of it too is there's just nothing to play for right now in spring. Independently of spring just not mattering, it's just also we're in the middle of a split, so there's no stakes or anything right now. I don't know if TSM is mathematically eliminated from playoffs, but if they are, that still leaves like 9 other teams that could still realistically make playoffs if they wanted to. Um, so there's obviously a lot of fighting to be done there. So, as the split starts to draw to a close and we get closer to finals time, there will be a lot more to play for, especially when playoffs gets ready to kick off. And that's the same with everything else. I know there's been a lot of discussion about, LCS lower viewership this, and it's not the same as last year, and LCS dying and stuff like that. It's not. It's just there's nothing to watch right now, right? I would tell that even the most diehard LCS fan right now who hasn't been watching, if they were to say, hey, is there anything worth watching right now? I would say Team Liquid versus Cloud9 when that happens, but beyond that, not right now. Because right now, if you're looking at matchups, like you're looking at some of these middle of the pack matchups that would be interesting in terms of how the standings are, but like the only matchup to see right now that is going to be exciting is Team Liquid versus Cloud9. Because like whoever wins that matchup, they're probably going to be the team that's going through the winners bracket into the LCS finals. I mean, obviously that's not a guarantee. Anything can happen, right? Crazy stuff happens all the time. But realistically, like between Cloud9 and Team Liquid, the winner of this match, because this is the second time they're going to play for the split, whoever wins that, it's probably going to be your finalist there in Houston this year. So actually, that brings up another point too. Like with the LCS, with the way it is right now in terms of just a kind of a lack of some really spectacular players, with the exception of it being front loaded on a couple of other teams. For this first live event to be really successful, because it's going to be the first one we've had in 2.5 years, and obviously they're going to have it in NRG. I have no idea how they're going to section that stadium off to make that happen, because I have performed in that stadium. It's a little awkwardly built in terms of how you would want to cordon stuff off, so I have no idea how they're going to handle that. I imagine they're going to slice it down the middle, because you can't really do an end and make that work. So if you kind of slice it down the middle and arrange it that way, you could probably make it work, and then just section off, a middle section within the stadium. But regardless, it's a massive stadium. It's not a basketball stadium, right? This is not going to be like the Shifet's Arena in St. Louis or anything like that. Like this is a full blown venue. This is 80,000 plus total that it could hold. And I don't know again what their idea is for how many people they think they're gonna have. I would argue that after 2.5 years without an event, they could probably sell 80,000 seats, if we're going to be honest, because people are bored. They want to go do something. Some of them probably have some money to spend, especially League of Legends fans who have been waiting for the last couple of years. They've got that money saved up after not being able to go to the last couple of events that were canceled. And there's a huge drive to go to one now. So I think people are just going to be itching to go to an event, which makes that exciting. But also you need to have an exciting matchup there, right? And I don't like seeing the same teams over and over again in a finals, right? With the exception of TL. As long as it's TL, I'm happy. Realistically, I'm happy with any team, but like if TL's there, like no matter how many times TL goes to a finals, I'm happy that they're there. But realistically speaking, I don't like seeing the same teams over and over again. And normally when you get new matchups, it's pretty exciting, especially, if it were to be something like, I don't know, in my wildest dreams, like let's say maybe it was like a FlyQuest versus Immortals finals, like how crazy that would be. But in this particular instance, because it's their first event and they need it to be successful, in this instance, you would almost want it to be Team Liquid versus Cloud9, because those are very clearly the two best teams right now. That's probably not going to change in the next couple of weeks. And so going into the finals, like regardless of who's the first and second place team, like going into the championship finals, like that is an exciting matchup, because there's two really good rosters. There's drama, for both of them, especially for the Cloud9 side. So, I mean, there's really cool narratives to be made there. For Team Liquid, bringing in Bwipo, having Core JJ get his green card, having a very, very solid roster, not necessarily built with superstars, but built with high-level talent that works well together, and with having Jensen and Santorin and all this other stuff versus, Cloud9, who, early in the season, they get rid of LS. It's the controversial decision, and, they start winning a bunch of games and da-da-da-da, and they get to the end, and, are they able to prove they don't need LS? That kind of stuff. Like, those are some really cool narratives that would drive viewership for a finals, but also, again, same thing with a matchup like with FlyQuest or an Immortals or something like that. It's like, these two teams that, they haven't been to a finals yet. Their first time there, it's going to be a brand new LCS champion. Who's it going to be? I think there's some exciting stuff to happen there, but you want a high level matchup before the finals there. So if you're the LCS, you're hoping it's probably going to be Team Liquid versus Cloud9, just to have something that you know is going to be a good match and that you know is going to bring people out. So I think that's something to be excited for later on. But I think right now, obviously, it's still very much developing. So not a whole lot to be vested in right now. So again, just kind of some loose thoughts with the LCS right now. I think worldwide for League of Legends right now, I think looking at the two best regions, I mean, it's going to be the LPL and the LCK by far. T1 is by far the scariest team in the world right now. If MSI was tomorrow, they'd just win. I'm sorry, there's just not a team right now that can take them. People keep talking about, oh, it's this top lane weakness for T1. Man, that's a stretch. I mean, that's reaching for. I mean, that's reaching for something to find wrong with T1. I mean, and T1 has done a fantastic job in covering for that weakness. They have good synergy, with the rest of the team between Faker, Gamayusi, and Zeus is going to be fine once he gets some more reps under his belt and gets time with Faker. And also, how hard is it to look good when you're sitting next to the who's who of the LCK talent right now? Like Faker's having a record season right now. How do you look good sitting next to that? He looks like peak Faker. It's this is really scary. If he goes to Worlds like this, it's they're tournament favorites from day one. It's how do you not pick T1 in that form? If they break the record and they stay perfect in this season, in this split right now in the LCK, it's you don't even remotely consider anybody else in first. That's scary T1 active and strong. So I think worldwide right now, I think if I were to rank it, it would probably be the LCK and then the LPL. And I mean, it's LCK by a fair margin, but that margin is entirely T1. It's the margin is T1. It's a big margin. And then you got a bunch of the LPL and LCK teams mixed together. And then on the whole of it, I would probably say LEC and the LCS are actually even this year. And that's not copium this time. It's just that I've not seen anything impressive for either of these teams. I mean, Rogue looked good in terms of being, I think was it 14-2 right now. I mean, they are pretty much the best team in the LEC right now, with the only exception being Fnatic, because man, I want to see those two play again. I'm not convinced Fnatic wouldn't take it from Rogue in a best of 5. And Rogue's Kryptonite has been best of 5, so it's them being the best in the LEC right now kind of has an asterisk to it. I believe that they are, but litmus test with Fnatic, I mean, there's some questions that Rogue would have to answer there. But beyond that, I mean, again, I think similar situation in the LEC as it is with the LCS. I mean, you have 2, maybe 3 really good teams in the LEC right now versus everything else. I mean, the 3 best teams are going to be Rogue and Fnatic and Misfits or G2, depending on what side of the argument you take there. But I think overall for that, I mean, it's a similar situation with the LCS, where they have a lot of front-loaded talent in a couple of the rosters. And I mean, Vitality is another team to take consideration there too. So they might have 4, because Vitality is scary in some ways, but they're not consistent right now, so they're not scary in others. And I don't know how much of a threat they are to a team like Fnatic or Rogue. But I mean, obviously that'll answer itself as they get ready to go into playoffs. Which, I mean, their playoffs are going to be fun too. Man, the other food for thought too. I don't like how far the LCS is behind the LEC in terms of season stuff. I liked it when the LEC stuff happened on the same day in terms of finals and stuff like that. Whereas now their playoffs, which I guess broadcast wise is going to be better. Right, because now you don't have LEC and LCS tripping over each other within the same weekend, which I think was excruciating. It's trying to wake up the morning of an LCS finals and you're just watching, the LEC finals on your phone or whatever before you get into the arena. It's you're always stressed, even before going into the LCS finals, because you want to know who wins Europe. Whereas now I think there's a good grace period now between when those finals are going to happen for both these regions. So that's something to be looking forward to. But I also kind of like having LEC and LCS stack on top of each other, because they get determined within the same weekend, and then they're both on the same MSI schedule. Whereas LCS this year, they're going to be behind in terms of having more time going into MSI, whoever's going to be the representative there. So, I mean, we'll see how that goes. So, but yeah, that's probably going to do it for this video. Just a loose collection of thoughts of how I feel about the LCS right now and where I think the league is headed, and just what I think the state is. Really at this particular time. I think things will get better as there is more to play for. I think the LCS will become more exciting, once we get close to playoffs. And I mean, summer obviously is going to be super exciting because, again, summer matters, spring doesn't. So, I mean, it's going to be a clown fiesta in summer of all the stuff that's going to happen. I mean, it's going to be a wild ride, but beyond that, I don't really have much else to say. So I appreciate you guys watching. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up, and if you want to subscribe, I'm not going to tell you have to because it's completely up to you, but I'd appreciate it if you did. But that's going to do it for me, so thanks for watching, and I will see you next time. Cheers.